It is a race between Michael Saylor and Bitcoin layers. That is, who can acquire more Bitcoin, the Bitcoin or on-chain economy or the corporate treasury? Now, I am kind of manufacturing this race a little bit, but the race is on. Michael Saylor is buying a crap ton of Bitcoin seemingly like every week, and it's only accelerating. But at the same time, we see a lot of like Bitcoin staking or like locking Bitcoin or wrapped Bitcoin kind of heating up as Bitcoin becomes this kind of like pristine asset that the broader crypto economy demands. I will dive into this a little bit more this episode. If you're listening, this is going to be more of a visual heavy episode. This is a Monday live stream. I typically do more of an analysis approach on Mondays, live stream onto our platforms, YouTube and X. And I typically pick like a topic and go over some charts and try to play the armchair analyst a bit. So make sure you stay tuned. I will talk about the Bitcoin corporate treasury versus Bitcoin layers race right after our word from our sponsor. Bitcoin Season 2 is brought to you by Botanix. Botanix Labs is pioneering a new direction for DeFi with the first EVM L2 running on Bitcoin that's built to be forward secure, decentralized, and share gas fees generated by the network with users. See the future of DeFi at Botanix, botanixlabs.xyz. So first, let me cover some basic metrics. I'm going to share my screen here. If you're listening, I'll try to talk through this a little bit, talk through what I'm seeing. And if you're watching, then obviously you see it. So let's kick it off. Before I get into kind of the meat of what I'm talking about today, let's just hit mempool.space. It's usually where I begin my day, checking mempool.space. And fees are, in the single digits, 6 to 11 sats per VByte right now. We saw over the weekend fees drop down to like 2 sats per VByte. In fact, we saw one of the lower boundaries, or one of like the lower transaction events over the weekend with very little transaction activity, and the mempool started clearing. As you can see here from this graph, this pink part at the bottom is all these 1 to 2 sat per VByte transactions, which are just sitting there waiting for the higher fee transactions to clear so that those can go into blocks. Right now, we have roughly 90 to 100 blocks worth of transactions. So if transactions stopped immediately, right now, we would have, it would take about 100 blocks to clear all of the transactions kind of in the backlog. About 100 blocks, that's not quite, that's about 2/3 of a day. It's about, 18 hours. Then we're halfway through a difficulty adjustment. Blocks have been coming in roughly 10 minutes. We're only targeted for a 1% upwards difficulty adjustment targeted for December 29th. And then as far as like pools share of the overall network, Foundry's at 33%, Antpools at 17%, via BTC, F2 are kind of roughly neck and neck. The one thing that's really interesting is Marathon. Marathon, if you're not aware, is a public miner where they have a pool that all their hash rate points to. They're the only public miner who does this currently, where they both got the data centers and the pools, and Marathon has been adding hash rate like crazy, causing them over the past year to go from roughly like 3% of the overall blocks produced on Bitcoin to now 7%. That goes from about 18 exahash to roughly like 30 to 40 exahash, depending on how you measure it. Their public statements, I think, come in around 40 exahash. So they've been gaining ground like crazy. Very interesting to watch. Do a little bit of ordinals data. Not a whole lot going on here. We saw a lot of on-chain cumulative inscription activity over the past month with a BRC20 run, and mainly driven by Asia. So the past couple of weeks, we saw 100 to 250,000 inscriptions per day. And then we saw the secondary markets for ordinals assets decline across most blue chip collections, but you see a couple ones are up this week. Quantum Cat's up 10%. Pizza Pets is the hot new Tamagotchi-like game on Bitcoin. I'll probably be tweeting about this. This is a fun one to watch where you basically get a pet and you have to feed it or give it drugs or give it pizza, and then you have to take care of it just like a Tamagotchi on chain. But overall, the other like assets, Bitcoin Pub is down 20%, NodeMonks down 15%, Fukuhedrons, which is like the hot new, are they going to displace NodeMonks, is down 33%. So most of your big collections are down. That said, let's get into kind of what I want to talk about today. It's a race between the Layers versus the Saylors, and I'm going to lean heavily on a newsletter that we published this morning, written by Giannis, founder of the Bitcoin Layers project. If you're not aware, bitcoinlayers.org. They keep track of all of like a lot of metrics, like things happening on and off Bitcoin, and they do like security analysis for how secure these other chains are and the bridges are, and they kind of try to standardize like how you talk about them. And it's a really interesting project with a lot of interesting data and dashboards. But what I'm doing is I'm going to be using this website, Bitcoin Layers, to look at kind of like the cumulative, the aggregate amount of Bitcoin that may be wrapped, or that may be staked, or that may be bridged off chain in some way, because I think it's a really good like thing to compare against the Michael Saylor approach of we're going to buy a bunch of Bitcoin and put it in our corporate treasury. So this past week, you may have seen, I think this morning it was news, Michael Saylor under MicroStrategy added about 5,000 more Bitcoin. They top blasted at a average price of like $106,000. But they added, 5,000 more Bitcoin to their balance sheet to bring their total holdings in. I believe this chart is updated to about 444,000 Bitcoin. There's only 21 million Bitcoin, and Michael Saylor has 444,000 of it. This is very significant. And I have this chart here which shows the growth in strategic treasury reserve of MicroStrategy, which they began adding to in Q3 of 2020. So basically exactly 4 years ago, or as I say, one cycle. So MicroStrategy has $27.6 billion dollars in Bitcoin. That's 444,000. And you can see here that if we look at this chart, like they start accumulating in 2020, and they buy a bit for about a year, and then they are kind of flat for the majority of 2022. That was a bear market, if you don't remember. They start buying again late 2023, early Q 2024, and then this past quarter, Q4 of 2024, they have increased their Bitcoin basis by like 40%, going from 252,000 Bitcoin to 444,000 Bitcoin. This is massive. This chart, courtesy of SaylorCharts.com. He's so iconic now that he has websites named after him, including the MSTR tracker, which I'll pull up here too. So Michael Saylor is buying a shit ton of Bitcoin, and there are people copying him. We talk about this on the Mining Pod, our sister podcast over under Blockspace Media. Go check it out. Of the publicly traded Bitcoin miners who are buying Bitcoin similar to MicroStrategy for their treasury. And you see some other companies doing this. You see Metaplanet over in Japan that is doing a similar MicroStrategy play in Japan, but on a smaller scale. You see some sovereigns like I believe Oman and the Sovereign Wealth Fund of the UAE have some Bitcoin. So like this is a trend. But I look at this and I say this is what happens in like we're going to buy Bitcoin for our treasury world. But over in the on-chain economy, we have a different narrative. We have a similar narrative going on, but it's just I see it kind of being in contrast to the corporate treasury, which is in the broader crypto economy, which is now a little over $3 trillion, I think. Bitcoin is being used as like the asset of the broader of all of the crypto ecosystem. And so people are taking Bitcoin and they're bridging it to Ethereum, or they're bridging it to Solana, and they are using it on these other chains to do whatever. Sometimes they're going to participate in DeFi activities. Sometimes they're going to, like through Babylon, use it as a like staking mechanism to stake proof of stake chains. There's I did an episode with David Say last summer on Babylon and how that works. But like, you can stake it and use it to secure other blockchains. I'm waving my hands here, and what we're seeing here is a similar ramp up in the broader crypto economy. We're seeing a similar ramp up in demand for Bitcoin in these types of structures. And I'll dive into a little bit of what they are, but basically we saw this past spring there would be a total of about 230,000 Bitcoin, which are kind of off chain being staked or wrapped. And since then, we've seen about 100,000 Bitcoin be added to this cumulative number. And it's interesting to see this because I feel that it mirrors the MicroStrategy trend pretty closely, in that people want and demand Bitcoin. And I think I think it might be interesting to look at these two trends in contrast to one another. MicroStrategy is pretty straightforward. I'm going to pull up Micro MSTR tracker, where all the TradFi analysts are losing their minds over like the speculative attack against fiat and like how good of a value MicroStrategy might be, and they're like, MicroStrategy can be this reflexive reflexive stock upwards, and it's the only way for some of these companies to still get their hands on Bitcoin. They're still locked out of owning Bitcoin directly, whatever. So obviously there's a demand for MicroStrategy, but over in Bitcoin Layers land, the thing I think is much more interesting is this where else is Bitcoin being demanded? As more of kind of an on-chain maxi myself, I think it's cool to see where Bitcoin is being demanded in the new crypto economy. So let's take a look. We have three classifications here. We have wrapped tokens, we have staked tokens, and we have liquid staking tokens. Let's take a look at wrapped first. Wrapped which basically means deposit Bitcoin into an address, and then an entity will coordinate the issuing of a Bitcoin pegged asset, which is backed by the Bitcoin in their treasury. And they're going to issue a similar Bitcoin, which is finger quotes wrapped, on another chain. The most famous of these is wrapped Bitcoin on Ethereum, which trades roughly 1-to-1 with Bitcoin. But this is now more of a popular type of product. Coinbase has launched one. I did a podcast with Matt long ago, a thesis for TBTC on other chains. So this wrapped Bitcoin, we see the majority of it is under WBTC, which is custodianed and operated by BitGo. 135,000 BTC under BitGo, which has declined from its peak of like 155. We see the next is on Binance Smart Chain, custodianed by Binance and wrapped and put on BNB chain. We see Coinbase launching CBBTC for mainly use on their base chain, which is a based rollup on Ethereum. They have about 20,000 Bitcoin. We also see Lombard, Solve, Pump, and kind of like other well-known like stake providers. Liquid, which is the Bitcoin sidechain, has about 3,800 Bitcoin. Rootstock with 2,800. But the aggregate amount in all wrapped tokens goes from about 225,000 to 280,000 or so over the past 6 months. So that's that's 10%, 15% growth. And it's also becoming a more competitive category. You can see here on my screen, I have, it used to be pretty much just BitGo and Binance. It used to be just wrapped Bitcoin and Binance wrapped Bitcoin. But now we see a bunch of new entrants. We see Coinbase jumping in. We see Lombard taking significant market share, and as well as Solve. So interesting trend to watch. Then we have the second category, staking, which according to Bitcoin Layers here, they're just tracking Babylon. I think there might be some other type of Bitcoin staking, but this pretty much captures the lion's share of it, which is Babylon staking, which launched this past summer on mainnet with about 1,000 Bitcoin staked. Did another round in October, added another 22,000 for a total of 23.8 thousand Bitcoin staked, and now they have 57,000 for a total of $5.42 billion USD, 57,000 BTC now securing proof of stake chains through Babylon. Then we have a third category, which is liquid staking Bitcoin tokens. If you're not familiar with liquid staking, it's basically when you stake a token for a proof of stake system, there will be people who basically say, we think your stake tokens are secure. We're going to issue another asset that unlocks your staked tokens, so they can go use that asset out throughout the crypto ecosystem. And so it's funny because it means that your staked assets aren't really like locked up, calling into question a bit of the whole purpose of like staking. But you can issue tokens for the tokens which are staked, and you never really like lose all of your working capital. But liquid staking tokens, similar story here to staking, which is Solve, Lorenzo, and Unirouter are the larger liquid staking providers, and they will issue a liquid staked Bitcoin asset on their comparable chains. And they started with only 20 Bitcoin last spring, ramping up over the summer to 10,000 Bitcoin, continued growth through the fall, and now they're at a total of about 40,000 liquid staked Bitcoin to date. Zooming out, this means that there's roughly 300,000 Bitcoin across all networks, which are wrapped, staked, or liquid staked. Let's compare that to MicroStrategy's 444,000 Bitcoin, which is locked just in their corporate treasury. And so that means right now, MicroStrategy is single-handedly beating all of the other crypto economies combined for like demand for Bitcoin, the asset. If I were to compare trajectory and growth rate, though, up until Q4 of 2024, they were growing at roughly the same rate. Q4 23 to Q3 2024, both MicroStrategy and the on-chain crypto economy were growing at roughly a rate of 10 to 15% per quarter in demand for Bitcoin, the asset. What really happened is Q4 MicroStrategy leapt ahead by leveraging public markets like crazy and doing this whole debt swap thing for whatever. You can listen to every MicroStrategy podcast ever about that. But MicroStrategy added 40% roughly additional Bitcoin to their treasury. And so this paints a really interesting story, I think. And I think we'll probably start to see these economies and incentives diverge a lot over the next few years, where the corporations want Bitcoin. They want to do nothing with it. They want to have it in a wallet, and they want to sit on it and watch the number go up. Whereas Bitcoin, being a more productive, actively used asset in the on-chain economy, needs to do a few more things. And Bitcoin's base layer being limited, both a strength and a weakness, allows we'll see like those actors and those behaviors become we'll just have to see how they grow over the next several years. I think there's also one other X factor here, which is not appreciated, or maybe not on most people's radar, and that is what I call the lava.xyz effect, which is this Bitcoin lending market. And I would put this in its own fourth category. I saw on bitcoinlayers.org, you've got wrapped, staked, and liquid staked. I think there might be an interesting fourth category, which is Bitcoin, which is being used to lend against, which fits in a little bit of both the treasury and the like productive on-chain economy asset. If you're not familiar with what lava is, this is a little bit of a lava shield because I like them and I use them. But you basically lock Bitcoin up, and someone will lend you dollars against it, and you can go use those dollars in the real world. Um, while I don't think this, accounts for much more than a few $1 million US yet as a trend, I think this is this is going to be a very popular type of product and mechanism to take Bitcoin that people have stacked for a long time and avoid a taxable event in the US and start pulling dollars out of it. So I think this could be a trend that we should watch for and try to monitor as well. But again, similar story here, which is we're seeing in the grand narrative of Bitcoin being used as a pristine asset, as the like most in demand new type of asset going into the second half of this decade. We will see multiple different types of actors and categories emerge for use of this asset. So I will try to monitor this as best I can. I'm not a financial analyst. I am barely a normal analyst or self-appointed. But I'll be leaning on public information, and particularly the Bitcoin Layers guys, Giannis and Red over at Bitcoin Layers. I recommend you go to bitcoinlayers.org and read the newsletter we just published on behalf of Bitcoin Layers. You can find that on our website, blockspace.media. Yeah, really, really good piece on that this morning, especially during the holiday season. You might have some time. You might be able to finish a whole thought for once, and you can read through this uh, at your leisure. Well, without any further ado, thank you very much for listening to Bitcoin Season 2. Make sure to like and subscribe. If you are listening to this, you've made it to the end. Make sure you like this on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, and make sure you subscribe and hit the notification bell on YouTube. You will be happier because of it. I'll be happier because of it. I would really appreciate that. So thank you so much, and I will see you all next week.